No, there's no baby in the background. There's a almost 4-year-old in school.
Okay, I feel like I'm picking up something. Yeah.
It's your own voice.
No, there's something in the back. There's something.
Oh, of
It's
me?
the
Of
echo
mine?
of your voice.
It's my voice echoing in hers. Okay.
Is it okay?
It's fine. It's not going to pick it up on
It's
that
gonna
side.
pick it up.
No, it's just recording
I'm
her
going to put
voice
this here.
and it's going to be fine.
If you say so, madam. You're the one that edits it.
I say so.
Is this better or worse, what I just did?
It's the same. Evidently, there's some
I've
kind of
lifted
weird
up a little bit.
feedback.
It feels worse to me.
Yeah, I think it's
Sounds-
worse.
It was better. There we go.
Yeah, that's
agreed.
good. Okay, let's start.
Okay.
Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I'm here with Russell Case.
Good morning, Harmony.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Are
I'm
you?
good. Yeah, I want to get to our guests.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we're here with my very dear friend who's been on our podcast before, but she's back. She loves us, and we love her. Lara Land. Hello.
Oh, she's been on the show before.
You were one of our very first guests. Yeah, like a couple
you were
of years
just practicing back then.
That was the first. Are you like her second, third guest?
I think so. Yeah, it's way back there.
Wow. I feel like I remember asking you if you felt like you were a white girl or not.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway from that interview. Yeah.
Yes.
Subsequently, I feel like Jews have really taken a hit kind of culturally. And I feel less like calling myself a white person these days. I feel like more antagonistic. Do you know what I mean? Like a little bit, like more interested in standing up for my ethnicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I definitely feel a rise of anti-Semitism. I feel stranger than I ever have in my life about like sharing that I'm Jewish. And it's an intense and embodied feeling.
Yeah.
It is an embodied feeling because that's where we feel things is in our body. And so I think we talked a little bit about this in the first episode. We talked about maybe inherited trauma, how going to temple on, you keep hearing about the Holocaust. You'd think you'd let bygones be bygones, but no, you keep hearing about it. And we keep like feeling it in our body. And we keep remembering that, my entire extended Hungarian family was, shot to death in a shooting pit in Hungary, enthusiastically by the fucking Hungarians, by the way. And you'd think that you would wake up every morning still holding that on.
And, never forget is a big thing in the Jewish circles. Like never forget, so we don't repeat history, which of course we always do as humans.
Yeah.
But I would say like my experience with that is a little bit different. Like I see it, the Holocaust coming up in my, like the way that I've been programmed to perceive life, not in this way of never forget, and like hearing the stories, because actually my family didn't really talk about the stories. Both of my dad's parents escaped Germany separately before they knew each other, and met eventually in New York. My grandmother went to Switzerland and then Cuba before she made it to New York.
I had an aunt go to Switzerland.
Yeah, and like of course, like tons of their family members were executed, and we never talked about it. We never heard about it. My father mentioned it to my mother-in-law like this holiday season, and I was like, you never talk about this. So, as I've like dissected that in my life, I've thought more about just the ways that my grandparents were because of what they went through and how that created just assumptions about how the way things are like in our family systems. So like, sticking together, stuff like that they inherited from what they had to do to succeed. Also, like assimilating.
Mhm.
And so they
Passing.
did like both, right? So like they definitely like stuck together with other Jews, just like we're stronger in a pack kind of thing,
Mhm.
right? Which of course that's an animal truth, most animals pack together for survival, with like similar, same species. Um and then at the same time, also trying to fit in, best
Mhm.
they can, be American, drop, like, for instance, I'm married to a German. I could know German,
Mhm.
but they didn't want to teach us that.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah.
now it's a crazy circle of life. Now my daughter is learning German. So I think about it more like that. And I think it can be very, very subtle,
Mm.
very subtle, because we don't it's very hard to see what's missing, right? it's
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
oh, it's very hard for humans to see what's not there,
Yeah.
like what things weren't there,
Mhm.
that I wasn't exposed to because of like the assumptions of the family.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think about like say like redlining a city where certain ethnicities aren't allowed to participate in the accumulation of generational wealth. And so you see that in Black communities where uh, the entire social structure is um, crippled by institutional racism. And at the same time, like I look at my own family and I look at what happened when a very wealthy diamond merchant family, a family that had actually looked at the designs and worked on the Hope diamond, was their entire wealth structure was just fucking eradicated. And then they're just shipped on a boat and they land in Detroit and like, well, do the best you can. You've got nothing. Start over.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that impacts a family 2, 3 generations down the line, and we're still mired in shit, from that event.
Yeah, that definitely impacts a family.
Hmm.
And then of course people called on, who do I know that's also in this community, and how can we help
Mhm.
each other, and
Hmm.
all those kind of patterns. But that whole generational wealth thing is a really important piece. um and I mean, like I said at the first time that we spoke, I don't want to like equate these things, because there are differences, because of the lighter skin color of
Hmm.
ethnically Jewish people. We can like fit in a way, and like we don't have to tell people that we're
Hmm.
Jewish. And
Hmm.
um that was kind of, I think that was the message of the never forget thing, was like, they will find you.
Oh,
Hmm.
no.
It's like, 'cause you were supposed to be like, not try to hide your Jewishness, because like,
Right.
they will
Yeah.
find you, and they will know. And so all that, like, converting that you do, it's not going to save you in the end, kind of
Right.
message,
Yeah.
which I get that, and I also find, Russell, like, in agreement with you, that the more I feel, um like, with the recent rise of anti-Semitism, it actually makes me want to come out more as
Yeah.
Jewish, even though, like, spiritually, I have a lot of different beliefs,
Hmm.
that, but and it's the same thing when I was in Germany with my husband. I'm like, if we ever lived here, I would, like, be Jewish here in a way that I'm
Right.
not, here, where I don't have to be, just to, like,
Yeah.
be like, "You like me? Well, know this, I'm Jewish."
Right.
Right.
Right. Like here in Canada, like an example might be like, well, I'm going to go put an American flag on my lawn to assert my cultural identity. Whereas I
Mm,
would never do that in the United States because I would be, be very much viewed very quite differently. Um, I was also thinking about this kind of what you said about embodiment, and I'm thinking about the reaction to that kind of story. I, I I don't know if we talked about this in the last podcast, but I had a friend in Milwaukee who came up to me and she was talking to me about the ACE survey, the adverse childhood experience survey, and she said I took the survey and I'm at a 10. Like there's no like how I don't understand how I'm functioning
Mhm.
when a 10 means I have all these behaviors. And I'm telling you, all of my friends in my Black community here in Milwaukee, who are all high functioning, members of the church and at school, are all at a 10 as well, as far as trauma that it's in their body.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about that. It's like, well, you just told me that you belong to a church, and you know, um, I imagine that church is quite like a physically kind of shouty church. Like you kind of you like a Quaker church or a Shaker church. Like there's
I think I know where you're going
movement,
with this.
like a lot
Yeah.
of movement, right? Kind of working trauma out of the body that is
Yeah.
like overwhelming your society and your ethnic group. Whereas I meet a lot of Jews who are like kind of hardwired to neuroses, who are
Mhm.
not embodied in their, and
The
like
movements, right?
maybe you kind of do this over and over again, like
Yeah.
this, like you're reading the Torah. Um, and
For
so
those
I feel like
just listening on audio, we're just like rocking like
Yeah,
forward
we're
and
I'm
back.
not.
rocking
It's
Very
forward and
true.
like
back. Yeah.
Jewish. I could see Harmony like
What
wrestle
is going
on the
on right now?
podcast.
It's true.
What
I
does
was
this
thinking.
suggest to even me? Um, yeah. So I feel like there was a real place, uh, or an outlet or a reason for, like, you could see why
Mm.
Jews took to yoga so deeply in the 50s and 60s.
Mm.
They went out to California and went for it, and built Esalen and built these whole different models of therapeutic resources that are all um, Hakomi based or physical
Somatic.
somatic. Thank you, somatically based, because we kind of needed it.
Yeah, I love that. Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Is
I
Yeah,
mean,
that
the
your
Jewish tradition.
experience with your body?
Say again?
Is that your experience with your body?
Was that my personal experience? Um, I think I had physical outlets. So when you're talking about that, I'm saying yes because I see it in a generalized pattern, right? Because I can
Mhm.
like see, especially the men, like the Jewish men, just like getting smaller, and I'm thinking about and the rocking at the book and the tradition of like there is a meditative tradition, but it's not so embodied.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking about that the Jewish tradition is very much about, questioning, this question answer, and it's up in the head.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, my personal experience, I think, like I had an embodied kind of physical life as a skier and just like sporty in general. But
Holding those adductors
the
together.
yoga thing was really for me like when I had this realization the first time like my senior year of high school where like we had this yoga unit that I was like, oh, like this release is very much connected to physical release, very much connected to emotional release.
Mhm.
And it could teach me so much. Also, the concept of like doing less to get more. I was kind of like an over trier, and I was overdoing in a lot of aspects in my life to like say that I was doing a lot. And then I would be able to lean on that when I wasn't getting results in my life. I don't know if this
Hmm.
Mhm.
is making sense. I'd be
Totally
like,
makes sense.
yeah, I was kind of lying to myself about like, well, I'm trying. And in some ways, I think deep down, I knew that I wasn't maybe doing like, I was doing 100 things that could be saying I was trying, but I wasn't doing the one thing that would really make change.
Mm.
And
That's important.
tell us what that one thing is.
Well, I just no, it's in like in my life, like sometimes where like let's say I was studying for an exam or something, I could be like, well, I read everything and like I tried so hard and maybe I just needed to I don't know, maybe there was just actually not reading the appendixes or something, but taking in the material or like
Mhm.
stepping away, or
Oh.
like there were, like actually there are more effective ways that are sometimes around doing less.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Integrating the what you read rather than devouring more.
Yeah. Yeah,
Digestion.
exactly. Like this
Yeah.
integration. But I also could see this in like relationships too. Just like ways of trying that weren't like effective in getting me what
Mhm.
I wanted.
Mhm.
Um and I could see a tendency to like be a victim in that and be like, I'm doing everything and
Right.
nothing's working for me and it's the other people. And like the practice of yoga really links for me in
Mm.
a shift of that perspective, taking ownership and doing less, but like going further with less.
Mhm.
Those are kind of concepts that came to me through the practice.
Yeah. It's interesting too that because I feel like that can also be a response to trauma. You know, we talked about sort of, I guess, a little bit like different ways of releasing sort of generational trauma or past trauma or your own trauma through movement or, you know, vocalizing like different ways of kind of shifting and moving that energy or yoga, shifting and moving that energy. But there's also like the reverse of that, which is exactly that pattern that you're talking about of like doing, right? And getting stuck in that busyness and that doing where you're not allowing yourself to feel, which
Yeah.
is actually going to allow the release to happen too, right? So talk a little bit about like that dichotomy of like needing to kind of do something to have the experience, but then to like be with the experience and stop the
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that balance and that integration. Like I mean the resting at the end of practice, which
Mhm.
is like, that part it's so important. It can be very hard to do. Um,
Mhm.
but that's kind of like that is an example of the integration process.
Mhm,
Or if you think of life as a little bit of an experiment, and you really look at it that way and you want to like get better at your life, then you'd want to, when you make a change, and after that change becomes like a little more integrated and habitual, like you'd want to sit with that for a while and see what the results are in your life,
Mhm.
before doing like 20 things and then not knowing like what was the change, like what was the thing that really initiated that change.
mhm,
Because maybe you don't need to do 20 things, maybe it's the one thing. And that's actually kind of a way of not seeing it. And then you can say, well, I can't keep up these 20 things.
mhm,
And so I just drop them all rather than just like going slowly and actually going further by just like
Mhm.
mhm,
taking one small change at a time and seeing what that shifts in your life. And yeah, that's another
Mhm.
example I see for that.
That's interesting. I was thinking about the arc that really made me think of the arc of my yoga experience, and that started out in a kind of very somatic and therapeutic way of really feeling a lot better when I meditated or rested. It became very psychedelic and really something very um, transportive for me and healing. And then I got really into it and tried really hard at it. It became more and more, what do you call, aponic. And I was
Yeah.
folding and folding and folding, touching my toes, doing push-ups and lift-ups and handstands and like really, really getting good at it. And then at a certain point, I was asked to kind of break away from all those handstands and do back bends and open up my hips and do Baddha Konasana. And it was like, and I felt a total emotional breakdown and rejection of that activity because it was so horrifying.
Mhm.
And I felt in like the feeling of hypodermic needles going into my groin, trying to do Baddha Konasana, or the terror and the night sweats doing kapotasana. And the the part I wanted to get to was, maybe you could comment on that experience of trying too hard, but also coming out the other side of it and becoming an authoritarian teacher that demanded that experience, that re-traumatizing horror from my own students. Because that certainly happened. And it's not as
Yeah.
popular these days. It's not as fashionable.
Yeah, that we've had a change. Big shifts have happened, which needed to happen.
In some
In
circles.
some circles, not everywhere. Well, I think I'll say at first what's coming up around the being with versus, the doing is like around uncomfortable sensation, right? Is we have to be able to hold the both and of that being with, and here's how it is right now,
Mhm.
and being with that, and then the and of maybe shifting or looking at, moving towards something in our future. It's like it's the same about life, I can be happy and grateful for the life that I have while I work towards making new things happen. Like those both things can exist together.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, a lot of times we forget that or we focus so much on one or the other. And sometimes that's okay as well. I mean, sometimes if you're trying to do something really big or new, a lot of energy goes in that direction. But I
Mm.
think it's helpful for long term, with practice, physical
Mhm.
practice, or with life practice, because most of our life is in process,
Mm.
and then like we get that thing that we're going for, that's a very little blip of excitement, and good
Mhm.
feeling. So if we can't figure out the both and of like enjoying where we are,
Mhm.
then we're only going to be chasing these blips of achievement, right?
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of confusion arises around that, in the practice, the physical practice of yoga, and in kind of some of the growth work, that folks come to Harmony with. So
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
I wonder, did we establish that we're here to talk about your book, which is
Yeah,
about
well, I mean,
did we actually say
I think
that? The
I think
Essential Guide to
we
Trauma
need to
Sensitive
say
Yoga?
that is that that you've written this incredible book, which is why we're kind of focusing on trauma and talking about trauma and its relationship to yoga and how yoga and movement and all of these different practices, mindfulness and being present as well as being present in the body can help to, process, release trauma. And you have this beautiful book called The Essential Guide to Trauma Sensitive Yoga, that's coming out. It's going to be released May 2nd, I believe.
that's
And
right.
and so yeah, tell us, I mean,
Tell us about the construction of the book and
yeah,
why you thought that you should make one.
I want to go back to like when we first met and you had just you were just starting your nonprofit organization and you're started. I think that's kind of the start of a lot of this work and how you kind of really began, I don't know, creating your trauma informed teaching model and teacher trainings and looking at how people in underserved populations or people who might not come to yoga or have the accessibility to yoga are processing are what it's like for them to come to yoga and also experience those sensations that have been deeply buried in their bodies coming up again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it a lot of the book is based on my work within my nonprofit. If we go way back, because I know Russell loves to like pull up some old names. I guess it starts with like Nancy Yu like sending me to Rwanda, basically. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
So my second trip to India, like I was coming off like the end of 3 months, and she's like, "Hey, they're looking for a female Ashtanga practitioner teacher to go to Rwanda and do yoga with some genocide survivors there." I was like, "I'm in." So that kind of like started that journey for me. I mean, it goes probably like way deeper and longer to my whole, like we were talking about, my
There's
upbringing, my
some
family
scars. Yeah,
history,
yeah.
desire always in my life to find a way to be useful,
Hmm.
um, that feels right for me. And that experience, had a strong impact on me. And then I opened my yoga shala um, in New York City, Land Yoga, and that was first before the nonprofit. And even that had a very strong impact on me as well, because, the people that came to my yoga studio were not the same bodies that we were seeing in India.
Hmm.
Um, generally, like the age, like medium
Right.
was much older.
Mhm.
And so I learned really quickly to I mean, I had that those like authoritative teachers, and I had that in my system from the lineage and the way it was passed down, but I kind of figured out really quickly that I needed to like be with the people and teach the people and from where they were at. So that was because I had a really incredible, diverse in every way student body that came through my yoga studio. And then the nonprofit, I started for a number of reasons, but I felt like there were people that were just never going to walk into the studio that we wanted to serve. And so we started partnering with other nonprofits that were specifically serving like trauma survivors, or where we could assume there were a lot of folks who had been through trauma in those spaces. And then I started training teachers to be ready to share yoga in those spaces, because they really were not. Even highly trained yoga teachers, they were not. And that is my experiences in those settings, and trainings I've taken and given since then are all what kind of come into this body of work, which is the book. But a lot of the book is about group yoga classes, like regular classes,
Mhm.
not necessarily, how to teach at a shelter or at a food bank, but
Right.
like, you know, everyone has been through some kind of trauma. And, there's a lot of talk these days about like little T trauma and big T trauma. And like, I don't even know what that means anymore because, I had a psychiatrist on my show, on my podcast, and she was talking about how the studies are really showing that people are very resilient against some of these, like a single incident
Mhm.
trauma. We can come back quite strongly from that, but it's the day to day, racial
Yeah.
oppressions, um, absence of love or compassion, loneliness. These nagging,
Mhm.
stress inducing situations in life eventually add up, and it's that one more drop in the cup of water that overflows. And those are harder to see, harder to detect. I mean, one of the
Mhm.
biggest elements for trauma relief is being believed, or even the thought that someone would believe you if you told them.
Mhm.
So if you
Right.
think about these more invisible traumas, or harder to see traumas, absence, neglect, like we were talking about, it's harder to see what's
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah.
Then you think about someone, first of all, not even realizing it, seeing it on themselves, and then being like, who am I going to tell this to? Who's going to believe me?
Mhm.
And that's what creates some of the real damage. So I think a lot of that is in our yoga rooms. And, trauma survivors aren't wearing like a big sign that says, I'm dealing with traumatic stress right now. So we
Right.
have to start to open our eyes to how it's in the room.
You do get some teenagers who dress to tell you exactly how they're feeling. You know, like, look, I'm wearing I'm wearing all black here for a reason. You know,
Yeah.
he's thinking, you know,
What is it about like trauma informed teaching or holding a trauma informed space that's different than just a regular teaching space or a
Mm.
regular, conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing, the biggest thing that I devote my book to and my trainings to is the awareness.
Mhm.
Because when we have the awareness of all the kinds of incidences that can produce traumatic stress in the body, um, and we open our eyes to the people in front of us, that we don't know what they're going through, right? So if you just
mhm,
start to think like, I don't know their family history, you know,
mhm,
I don't know I don't even know what their home is like. Forget about like what their mom was like and their grandparent, you know?
mhm,
Mhm.
So it's like this added layer of sensitivity that
Mhm.
once one really opens one's eyes to that,
Mhm.
and gets in that practice, it shifts everything in the space, right?
Mhm.
Because then we're really humble in our teaching. Like, I don't know you, you know, and
mhm,
I
Mhm.
respect that you're the expert on you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and so that's the biggest thing,
Mhm.
and and what we work on at first. So like, you know, looking like we did, looking at your own family history, learning how that shows up in your own life, and then considering just looking at your students and thinking about like all the stuff we don't know about, you know, what their lives are like, and learning about like I've just opened my eyes to like caste oppression and religious trauma that I really didn't hadn't been really thinking about,
Mhm.
and there's so many other examples of this. So just learning about the experiences of others different than us, right? I think comes up a lot on your podcast about,
Mhm.
you know, teaching. A lot of people teach in a way that is like based on their own experience of being in the posture.
Yeah.
mhm.
And that would be like
Yeah.
the opposite of what I would be teaching.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was
That's
thinking,
a
is that
great
this
example.
notion of getting to know the person you don't, and assuming that you don't know this person, and yet we go and apply our technique to them that's based wholly on our own experience, and that is, so incredibly limited in
Yeah.
terms of our understanding. And yet emotionally, I still really resist that idea. You know, I just want to, I do want to just treat them like, objects.
It's easier, isn't it?
Mm,
Just
Yeah.
this
yeah,
complicates things a lot, you know.
this is
It's
the way this works. I adjust and you submit. That's it.
Yeah, we
That's
actually talk about that often in our conversations about the nuance and the amount of work it takes to understand different perspectives and um, open your mind and yourself to the idea that you don't know the answers and you don't have all the answers and there is no right or wrong way, but there's many ways and
Yeah.
that's and then you have to step into a space of the unknown and that's uncomfortable because it's neither here nor there and it takes a lot more energy and it takes a lot more effort and presence and awareness and work to
And
be
look,
able to hold
the
that space, right?
yeah, and also, you know, look, this the practitioner, right, is
Mhm.
gonna learn to recognize and decipher feelings in their own system.
Mhm.
mhm,
They're not going to be dependent on you. And of
mm,
course, you know, if we're running a business where we want them to be dependent on us to come, you know, only want us as a teacher, or if we
Mhm.
have any kind of take a little water.
Yes, yes.
Mm. If we have, you know, I mean, of course, these things come up with our egos and whatnot. So,
yeah,
like, you know, it's always being aware and being in our own practice of like, where is my nervous system? What's
Mhm.
showing up for me right now? How is this person triggering me in my place of how I feel my role should be in this room,
Yeah.
and like using our practice to be aware of that. And okay, that's arising for me right now. Let's get like, and not, also not bashing ourselves about that, but having
Mhm.
compassion for these are human instincts.
Yeah.
That's human. Okay. That's curious. Like getting a little lighter, a little more curious about it when those things come up, but also being really attuned to that and
Mhm.
and alive to that comes up, and that ultimately we want to help the practitioner to decipher their own system
Mhm.
Mhm.
and make choices that are in alignment with their lives, every part of their
Mhm.
lives, that better their lives, and only they know that.
Yeah.
So we can help them to expand the choices that they see. If we look at a trauma perspective, when we're stressed, right, even a low level of stress, our choices start to diminish, right? We get
Mhm.
narrow. It's like as soon as we get that sympathetic nervous system going, it's like we actually start to narrow our sense of choices.
Yeah.
We become more binary. Like I think I can do
Mm.
this or this, right? I can fight or
Right.
flight. I can leave it. Like we
Yeah.
don't see when we're relaxed, when the nervous system is relaxed and our prefrontal cortex is online. Like the full breadth of creativity is there. Lots
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
like really nuanced choices are available to us. But when stress is in the system, we start to think, our senses become very narrow as well, right?
Mhm.
We get tunnel vision, right? It's like
Mhm.
all these things. So the more that we can help the students to relax and see that they have actually a ton of choices, um, and the more that we can be in a place of really knowing that all of like your choice is so great for you. Like good for you for feeling that. Good for you for knowing that, for sensing
Mhm.
that in your body. Like what else can you tell me? The more that we can be in that place instead of like, well, I wanted, okay, yeah, it's okay. You rested today, maybe tomorrow, like with our
Mhm.
own agendas. I think the more
Right.
we can just allow our students to grow in their freedom and in their
Mhm.
self-knowledge.
It's really beautifully said, and I want to ask you about a situation that came up for me and see how I could have done it differently, and ask you how to apply that technique or even set it up differently. My my wife's ex-husband came to me and asked me to sub his class, which is kind of a really very novel situation right away. And I walked in and I knew that I should that he was had a very light touch as far as orthodoxy, and I knew that should be my starting point in the room. I'm just there, kind of as a shepherd, a guy. I'm just here in the room and giving some adjustments. Um, I saw light adjustments, and I saw a young woman come in, and I could feel it right away that she was sensitive. And I thought, okay, this is I'm even going to be even lighter with this person than I would with anyone else. And then I could see a lot of different places where she was held in her body, say like holding her heart in a more conservative way, holding her hips. Baddha Konasana was impossible, but I wasn't pushing it. And then one day I just slightly pressed against her back. I didn't even touch her legs in Baddha Konasana. And I could see it vibrated for her. I was like, oh, okay. And she said something, and I said, I understand. Um, and then she came up to me after class, started crying, and said, your adjustments are just way too hard, and I can't be here anymore. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was full of so many different feelings like contempt,
Yeah.
anger, rage. and this feeling of hopelessness, like that this entire system is not working anymore for anyone.
Mm. Mm.
And I wanted to go right back into retirement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a long talk with my wife's ex-husband about it and what to do about it, and what was going on with her, and maybe she was really deeply overworked, but it was really like something that stays with me,
I'm
that
sure, yeah.
entire encounter. How could I have gone into that room with it maybe more with your viewpoint and your technique, and like say this is a trauma sensitive environment, and establish that,
Mhm.
so I wouldn't be completely rejected if something did go too far.
Yeah. Well, first, Russell, I just want to acknowledge what a really sensitive position that was for you to be in. It's never easy to be like a sub jumping into a space
Mm.
and then to be subbing for the ex-husband of your wife. I mean, this raises a lot of other kind of ego things in our system, even if, that wasn't fully there. I mean, there's just so much stuff in there. And I also just really want to acknowledge your like the fact that you really tried, right? Like you saw her and you used your skills and your training and your sensitivity as both a teacher and a human being and a great human being, to really assess and give her like the best of your training and abilities. And then like that was met with a kind of she told you that didn't work for her.
Hmm.
And that's hard to receive,
Yeah.
right? That's like really, really hard to receive. And it's
Hmm.
obviously still with you, because those things are hard, right? It's like
Mhm.
if you were doing something that you weren't trained at or skilled at, or had some like sense of like, I'm good at this. This is like, it's a part of your identity that you're like decent at that,
Yeah.
Mm.
and that hurts. That's really, really hard. Um, so, like compassion for yourself around that. And I have a lot of compassion for that. I can, relate to that experience. And I think it's really good that you're looking at it and asking that question. Um, like, why not learn from it,
Hmm.
um, I think um, so some of the identity work that I like do when I'm training teachers is like if we do that previous to coming in, that's going to help with some of that, so the
Hmm.
just the roles in the room are just so different, where first of all, with touch, there's a lot of consent work
Hmm.
first, that's done around touch. And in the first time that I mean, in all our really trauma informed classes, the teachers aren't really touching at all,
Hmm.
which is different. And of course, when you come into a Mysore Ashtanga room, there's also, so added to everything you just explained, there's this expectation that you feel of like they want adjustments or they might want, and like that's what I should be giving them. That's my only thing to give them in this room,
Yeah.
right?
I have one job.
Whereas from my framework, what I'm giving them, or teaching teachers to give them is this really unconditional acceptance of where they are. So any kind of touch that might occur, if let's say like there was consent for touch, which is a big question that we could do like a whole podcast on as well,
Hmm.
because with if there's a power dynamic where you're a teacher and this is student, like can a student really consent when they're set up to want to please you? This is a whole nother question. I'm going to put that
Hmm.
in aside for a minute.
Hmm.
Yeah.
um,
Wow.
but let's say there is like a consent for some sort of light touch. I would suggest touching in a way which says like, I'm here with you, and like right where you are. So not even trying to like move into any change. And
Hmm.
a way that I kind of demonstrate this in my trainings is by asking when I train yoga teachers, I have them make this tight fist with one hand, and with this other hand, like try to move it, try to pry the fist open.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do it again, and I just have them take the other hand and just hold the squeezing fist where it is. And if you try this, you'll see that for most people, the experience of just allowing and holding the tight fist where it is, it's harder to keep that fist tight. So I'm just cupping this really tight fist. It begins to let go on its own without trying to pry any change.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing that most of us need is just to be seen and acknowledged and accepted exactly as we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It irks because I've taught many different adjustment workshops on exactly that premise, on how to adjust the koshas before actually adjusting the body, and and being aware that you're penetrating intellectual and emotional layers of a person before even getting close to them, to their
Yeah.
physical presence. And it
Yeah.
was, and feeling like I'm an expert at that, and then I've been totally rejected. And it's like, wow, and it just really, it really threw me.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I had someone in Stanford in California where I the whole of my relationship with them was was no touching. And I taught her, I think, halfway through intermediate without ever once adjusting her. And it was,
Wow.
based on that
Physically.
physically. No, I mean, also emotionally, I didn't touch her probably, but you know,
Verbally.
verbally, I'd make, and it was that was an eye opener for her. Like, she had experienced some trauma, and she was grateful to be in the room. And anything that I did, any way that I could guide her without touch was really deeply appreciated.
Yeah.
And so, all that said, I kind of like, I would want to like put a sign down, and I think they're doing that in Mysore today. Like, you put a sign, I I consent to be touched, and that whole question of
No,
consent is
no
in
adjustments,
no
injured.
adjustments,
Yes,
injured, yeah.
no. Yeah, what do you think about that?
That
I mean,
whole
coming
question
from
of
a
if even consent is possible is amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and I refuse to answer. It's just a good question to pose, and getting out of this expert like role and just being more in like in this place of learning. I think we got
Mm,
into this, most of us, because and when I say into this, into yoga and spirituality and all this stuff, because we're like, most of us are really interested in learning, and
healing.
just going back to that is helpful, just being in the questions more than in the answers. And these are good questions, and I don't know if they have straightforward answers.
Yeah.
Mm,
Because
But being
touch
curious,
can also be really healing too, right? So
for
it's
sure.
such an interesting kind of paradox that the same type of adjustment or the same type of touch for one person is incredibly healing and soothing and comforting, and for
Yeah.
another person could be triggering.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. And a
100%.
lot, like you're asking about the cards, I think a lot has to do with the trust, and the relationship in the room with the practitioner and the guide or the teacher. I'm even like not wanting to say like student teacher, but like the guide in the room, or the space holder in the room. And like if I feel like I put a no adjustment sign up and you're going to judge me, or someone
Mhm,
next to me is going to like, then it doesn't really work anymore. So it's very layered and complicated. And the thing is that because life is layered and complicated doesn't give us the right, or shouldn't, cause us to drop out of the complications. And like, so kind of, again, referring it back to your situation, Russell, I would just, and to any teacher that I was working with, I would talk about, like, what do we do when harm does happen? Because we're humans in a space together and things are going to happen, and so it's how we react in those moments that really sets us aside and can either be like a very healing and relationship building activity, or cause more distance and maybe folks to give up on teaching or give up on practicing or hold negative emotions, or like we can all get in there. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's really hard to get in there.
Yeah.
It's hard to get in there in relationships. I mean, especially in all of them, in new ones where we don't know each other, and even in like even in longer term relationships, where something we might say is going to rock the boat and disturb the equilibrium of the
Mm.
roles that we play in relationships, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all that.
Yeah.
But that's like the beauty of life, and it's that's the daring of living, I think.
So,
Yeah.
in a Harmony told me this week that we were both invited on a yoga trip, and I immediately thought again about, like, oh, do I really want to be that guy in the room again? And but this person asked for both of us specifically, and I want to kind of feel good and comfortable about going there and going to the room and doing what I'm paid for, which is breaking open people's hips, and in a
Gently.
that's how I do it normally. And
Mine's
yeah, and so I love that, like, that idea, that notion that I just want to set the intention that I'm there to learn. And
yeah,
that's
I
what
love
I'm
it.
there for. And instead of, like, they're there to learn from me and I'm going to fucking show them how to learn. No, like, the reason that they asked me to come there is to learn.
Yeah.
And it's a radical idea of a visiting teacher. Because the fucking sentence is that the teacher's coming. Mm.
But I think
Yeah.
something happens, like, when you do, as a teacher, you approach the situation from that perspective of what am I learning? What am I being taught in this situation? Because then it does open you up to the way you're approaching conversations in a different way as well. You're no longer necessarily, I mean, you might have some expertise on a subject because you've studied it,
Yeah.
but rather than it being like so hierarchical, it's much more in conversation rather than a pedantic kind of authoritarian dictatorship teaching style, right?
Hurt people hurt people.
You Russell. No, you'll blow their minds if you're um like if you say something and you go like, you ask them,
Yeah.
where are you feeling that statement in your body? Or like,
Mhm.
n- you're going to be teaching them
Mhm.
also by, the way you are. Because they're looking at the way you are,
Mhm.
and there's ways of learning, so many different ways of learning.
Mhm.
Great way of learning is modeling,
Mhm.
so the kind of self-acceptance, curiosity, beginner mindset, presence that you bring into this space is what you can be teaching them. These are qualities that they
Mhm.
can learn from your doing less, as we talked about like way
Mhm.
early on. Like
Yeah.
they see and experience your nervous system and your whole way of being doing less. And that's like interesting. Like that's
Mhm.
different.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it.
Mhm.
So can people pre-order your book?
Sure can.
Yeah, and
Lots of
I love,
bonuses.
like, inside you have different yoga sequences, or is it postures? And
Yeah.
tell me about the models. It sounds really interesting.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. So the book is like kind of in like two parts. The first part is all about like what is trauma, all different kinds of events that could be traumatic. We didn't get too much into this in this conversation, but the same event can happen to two different people, and based on a bunch of different circumstances, one could be traumatized and one not, right?
Right.
So that's a whole thing.
Mhm.
So understanding all of that, and again, this is all to open our eyes to the different life experiences that are out there in any shared space. I'm starting to talk about this book in like any facilitated shared space. Like,
Right.
it would be good to have some trauma sensitivity, because for sure,
Yes.
someone in that room, multiple people are have traumatic stress running through their system. So, and then we look at what happens, the brain science, what happens in the body when the stress response happens, and if it stays on versus if we have the support. And like I said, one of the biggest resources that we can create as yoga teachers is like safer spaces where people feel really comfortable being themselves, community, really ethical, supportive community, which we don't talk enough about, I think. Um,
Or create
and
enough of.
and then the second half of the book, and interwoven in the whole book, are the models
Yes, the
doing the
model.
yoga asanas, their stories. I think there's 4 or 5 models in the book, and then there's two extra bonus sequences done by Pratibha, another model. They're all folks who have graduated. Almost all are folks who have graduated from the trauma sensitive yoga teacher training program that I do for yoga teachers who want to gain trauma sensitivity. One of them is Samantha, from our Samantha Lucas from our
Oh,
Ashtanga community.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
beautiful.
she didn't do my
Also
training.
interviewed one of the first guests that we
Yes.
Yeah, we
interviewed
talked
way a
about
long time
her
ago.
talked about her
Yeah.
motorcycle accident, and we
She had a
Beautiful.
motorcycle accident, and she also has complex childhood trauma, so she's been through it. And so all the folks are trauma survivors or teachers of trauma sensitivity that have been through the 3.5 Acres Yoga or my training, and also teach trauma sensitive yoga classes. And they
Amazing.
share their personal stories. One of them, he started teaching his mother, Timothy Lewis. He used to come to Land Yoga, and he's just one of those really interested students that wants a lot of information and is so into it. And I really encouraged him to do the trauma sensitivity training, and he started teaching at different nonprofits. And then his mom got COVID and was
Wow.
in the hospital, and he tells a little bit about the story of like coaching her through breathing and trauma sensitive yoga and techniques to help her from the hospital bed, and actually to like make it to the bathroom, which was like a really
wow.
hard
Wow.
exercise for her, like just to do that, and the trust building that happened between them, and it changed their relationship. Also because their family history is Seventh Day Adventist.
Oh,
I'm probably
yeah.
saying it wrong.
Yeah,
That's right.
70 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff against yoga, and a lot of,
Right.
and shifting that, and shifting his whole like family dynamic and relationships in his family. They're just like great stories. And then you see them, the sequences that are in the book are like, I don't believe like a sequence can be trauma sensitive or not trauma
Right.
sensitive, really, because it's more about the things that I teach in the book are about invitational language, like how to speak in a way that and not just saying I invite you to put your hand behind your head, but like actually being invitational in our speech. So developing language for that, non-hierarchical. So instead of, here's a quick thing like your yoga teacher listeners can do right now, is like, instead of saying like, if you can't put your foot behind your head, instead you could blah blah blah, you can modify like this. just use the opposite approach. Like I said, most of the things, if we just switch them, it'd be more trauma sensitive.
Right.
Wow.
And like,
Do
build it
this and
up.
this.
Yeah,
So
build up the
Build up.
I'll teach like the most gentle version,
Mhm.
of the shape. And then I might say something like, if you're feeling like you want a little bit more intensity or more of a challenge, you might try. And then I'll give like a more
Mhm.
intense version. And,
Oh,
I might model the more gentle version to signal like, that's what I'm doing,
Yeah.
So
right.
just really take the onus off of that, like more is better.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so things like that, other a lot of very technical and easy to implement things that can make your classes just immediately safer
Mhm.
for trauma
Mm.
survivors.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I think for
So the students
everyone.
themselves can't be that for everyone. Yeah. No, we're all trauma survivors. I mean, the
Yeah.
statistics are really, really high.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I mean, I like that too, sort of what you're bringing up is not presupposing you understand someone's life just by looking at them,
Yeah.
right?
That's
I
a
mean, you could have someone come into the room and they look like they have it all together and they're, shiny and sparkly and you can presuppose all kinds of things, but you have no idea what kind of background they grew up in or what's, gone on in their history. And so I think it's really important to, yeah,
And
be
that helps
trauma
us.
sensitive in your teaching,
It's very, very important, and it helps
Mhm.
us, again, if we see that, and then you see that student that always has to be in this row or that space, right? This is a common thing that, like, irks yoga teachers, especially I
Yeah.
feel like Ashtanga yoga teachers, like, "Mix up your spot, like, why do you always have to be there?" Or something like
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
might start to see, like, that there's a reason, that
Mhm.
that they need that, and that it's maybe not our place to, like, make them grow.
Right.
Maybe like the best way to help them to support them in their growth is really by accepting.
Mhm.
And that just takes a lot of that like tension and a lot off of both the parties.
Mhm.
And I think it can actually reduce our burnout as teachers. Again,
Mhm.
I know that's a place of interest for you, Harmony, because I'm a
Yeah.
fan and a follower of all your work. And like, I think one of the biggest reasons that, people in healing professions have so much burnout is like wanting something different
Mhm.
for the person they're trying to help than they want for
yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, totally. Totally. And over, I guess you could call it like that codependence or over taking over responsibility, too much responsibility for your students rather than encouraging them to take responsibility for themselves, right? And
Yeah.
being able to like hold an independent space instead of a codependent space where you feel
Yeah.
like your value as a teacher or your value as, a therapist or whoever, whatever wellness professional is determined by the results your students are getting or your clients are getting, right?
Yeah.
But allowing them to have their own experience and define their own results and whatever that means, right? And I think
Exactly.
it's really important to like unhook our value, how we see ourselves from, our students or our clients or,
Yeah.
what they're doing. But often you have like a student, as a yoga teacher who's doing the, very nice advanced postures and you're like, oh, I'm such a good teacher.
Mm.
I have this amazing student,
Right. That's a
Yeah, I
codependent
think
situation.
it can be helpful to find out, like interview your student, have an intake
Mhm.
process, find out why they're there because people come for different reasons and reassess that regularly
Yeah,
because we know that those reasons change, you
totally.
know?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Especially if you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah. We've changed a lot.
Yeah, you might show up really wanting to like, reach enlightenment and put your legs behind your head and then 20 years later you're kind of like I just want to feel good in my body. I don't want to have
Exactly.
pain.
Mm.
So, yeah, it does change for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
true.
mean, I would like to be in a collective yoga space, like practicing with other people, but I definitely feel that um, in most of those spaces, there's like an assumption that I want something that isn't what I want from that experience. You
Mm.
know, like I think I would just want that to just be with people in like a shared physical space, but I don't want to be like trying to do um very flexible or like fancy yoga poses.
Yeah.
I don't want
Um
to be fat shamed, and that's my it's the most important thing to me.
well, that is important.
That is important. Yeah. So,
Man.
one other thing I wanted to talk to you about before we go is because you were a part of B School, I think, at the very beginning of your business, and it really informed, I think, and sort of your trajectory of creating all of these things and eventually culminating in this beautiful book that is coming to fruition, which is amazing. Can you just tell us and our listeners a little bit about what that was like for you and how it sort of created a bigger vision?
Yes, yes. Well, so two different books I just want to say. So the Essential Guide to Trauma Sensitive Yoga, which is coming out May 2nd, but is on pre-order now.
Yes.
Um, that's my newest book, and I just want to just say again and stress the pre-order because you get these extra sequences, restorative sequence, and a trauma sensitive body scan,
Nice.
which is awesome for relaxation, stress reduction, improving sleep. I did it
Where
last
can
night.
and
It's
they
like,
can find it on your website? Is that the best place to
yeah, and
pre-order?
so you can find it on my website, and you can pre-order from like anywhere that you like to get books, and then you just fill out my pre-order bonus form,
Perfect.
and you also get invited to an exclusive pre-order Q&A with me a week after the book comes out. So um, I just really want to push the pre-order because I don't know. Sometimes people like to wait till like the book is out, but there's a lot of real like the sequences that are the bonus ones are my favorites actually. Um, the book that I wrote with the influence and support of Marie Forleo and B School. I mean, it wasn't even just the book; it was like a whole change where I got certified in life coaching, and I was really getting more into a space of a coach and helping people with their goals to make changes in life. Um, Again, like always from this trauma informed framework, though, of like,
Mhm.
what do you want for your life? How do you see your life? What do you want for your practice? What small change, small, like super tiny, would be enough to like ripple and impact your life? And I've been experimenting with these kind of practices, teaching workshops on like train your brain and goal setting for many, many years at my studio. And I wanted to put them into more of like of a book, but I never wrote a book. I didn't know how to do it. And I ended up in B school. And through that process, I really was able to kind of start to shift my identity out there in the world. I had already felt like I shifted in myself, but I think like the way like my site looked and the wording and sort of like the way that people perceive me was not really in alignment with like the offerings that I felt were really um authentic to me. And so that stuff, like I always cringe because like I just want to be able to do my work and like people get it, you know, but
Right.
it's not like that. You know, like you have to put the colors and the fonts that like make people feel it. And I'm really not good at that. And I was really grateful to have the guidance of B School to help me to like I just remember like doing the questions of like to help me figure out who I am and how I could like really get that through to other people,
Mhm.
and just step by step redesigning like my site and the wording that I was using, and then eventually putting out my first book, which I self-published, which is called My Bliss Book, which is really it's an undated life purpose planner. It's
Mm.
undated because, as you can guess, I believe in like that change can happen at any time. We don't have to wait for January 1 to buy a planner. And I
That's
saw
right.
that I would always do that, and I would end up like putting it down. I mean, most people put their ideas down, come back to them,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't feel guilty about that. That is the process of life and change. So, but when you come back to your planner and it's like March and you didn't look at it all of February, you feel really bad. And I'd always be like crossing out the dates so I could still use it. So I
Yeah.
created this undated life purpose planner. So the thing that's so really cool about it is it comes with this whole automated year-long coaching program.
Oh,
So
cool.
every other week you get this email from me with tips for staying on track, because like we lose our motivation. That's
Yeah.
normal. We forget why we made a change, we're so motivated and then life happens. And so sometimes it just helps to have someone checking in.
Mhm.
And I give a lot of tips for like what to do when you kind of get off track, when you lose your motivation. And they just hit your inbox every other week to just help you stay connected. The first one, which you get immediately when you purchase the book, is and you sign up for the newsletters, comes with a downloadable meditation where you use creative visualization to picture your life. Some people like to do like what do I want to have achieved, and then like in end of life, and then what does that mean for 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 1 year.
Mm.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of times we make these like goals. Again, it's like a whole nother podcast or conversation, but we make a lot of goals because we think we should want something, or we just like forget to look at like, how is this in alignment with like my really, really, really big picture of my life? And when we see that, it's also easier to stay with them because we know why we're doing it. It
Mhm.
has like a deeper meaning for the way
Yeah.
we picture our life fulfillment.
Mm.
So really proud of that book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
excited. And did you create a special bonus code for anyone listening who
Oh,
wants
I
to get
sure
it?
did. And guess what it is? Harmony.
Excellent.
Harmony is the bonus code?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's so
Yes.
sweet.
And
I'm gonna go get my Bliss book right now.
Mm.
just put in code Harmony for 20% off.
Amazing. Yeah. But
And
that's incredible. That's
yeah.
so awesome that you created you created a product, an email sequence, like audible meditation, guided meditation. I mean, that's amazing. That's like
Yeah.
so much.
And that
Yeah.
was overwhelming. And, B School definitely was very helpful for me to like do that in steps,
Yeah.
and not get overwhelmed,
Yeah.
Mhm.
small, doable steps.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because it's
Well,
really easy. I mean, and
chunks.
you've been working for yourself, like, as I have for, 20 years or something. You can, I mean, even now I have like ideas for projects that I want to like bring to life and create. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like so much work. Like
Mhm.
start getting like that overwhelm with like all of the
Yeah.
steps that it takes to do something like that. And I mean, even, we created a retreat or like the fundraiser or the different things together, right? And
Yeah.
it's just like it's easier when you can break it down and you know how to break it down and like focus on one thing, and then step by step it comes together. And then also like focusing on collaborations. I think that's another thing that
Mhm.
often we don't do necessarily when we're just like alone as a solopreneur building your business. And I think that's another thing that's
Solopreneur.
solopreneur.
Hmm.
I think that's another thing that's
What a
really like
nifty word.
helpful and interesting too with the B School really encourages you to like reach out and like create networks. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's really like all about building other people up and like,
yeah.
you know, supporting other people. Like I have the most joy in my like social media when I share someone else's things
Mhm.
and like support them, and like all those models in the Essential Guide to Trauma Sensitive Yoga, like they're people that like they have their own yoga businesses now, and
Yeah.
part of putting them in there was like I feel like better when I can help other people to get their stuff out there. And yeah, that's I think what you're a little bit speaking to. And
Yeah.
um and also in the vein of like trauma sensitivity, and one of the things that I teach in the training in the book is about creating like a referral network. So like knowing, really knowing scope of practice and inviting other people in, right? So like I don't need to be everything. And
Yeah.
most of us need more than one thing,
Yeah.
right? Like again, it's going to speaking to burnout and speaking to like all these kind of like misalignments that we've been trained in, where we can retrain to say, I'm going to have like an EMDR person, a trauma sensitive cognitive behavioral therapist. Like I'm going to have like 5 or 10 people that I know are taking new clients, that I know, are taking insurance if that's a thing, or
Yeah.
reasonably where we're going, where I know that I'm not going to be everything to the yoga practitioner, that yoga is a part of a whole system of healing practices that they might need, some talk practices, some body-based practices, and I can refer them to people that I trust, and other people can do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. That's so important. Yeah, I think there's a lot of, especially when we start teaching yoga, a lot of, trying to be everything for a student. And
Yeah.
it's so helpful to just be able to say, you know what? I have the perfect person that you should go see.
And people don't realize like that makes you like
Yeah,
that's what makes you a senior experienced teacher, is like
totally.
knowing that and being able to do that really gracefully, and people will respect that, like just like it's really like respectful to say like, actually I don't know. If someone
Yeah.
asks a question, I always tell my teachers, it's like, I don't know, let me do some research on that for you, let me get back to you. Like
Yeah.
let's like normalize that, saying we don't know instead of
Totally.
trying to come up with an answer and be an expert. Like there's so much that I don't know.
Right.
Students will ask you anything, they'll
I
be
know.
like, my carburetor or whatever, is that a part on the car? It's like they get into that place where like everything. Like they might
Yeah.
asking me some questions and we'll be putting out some answers. Like
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Sounds like it's a problem.
yeah, it's just like the engine in the body. So blah blah blah. Like, come on, guys.
Talk to your mechanic about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I tell, I do, the training with the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, some circle coaching for their coaches that they're training, and so facilitating their learning that way. And I was just saying that, this week is, it shows you're a professional when you know your scope of practice.
Yeah.
When it starts to cross that line, you say, this is a little bit out of my scope of practice. Let me refer you to this person or that person, or,
Every doctor does
you
that.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think people will appreciate it, because it is the sign of being a professional and actually understanding what you know and don't know, and where
It
you're,
really is.
where you can really be helpful, and where it's like crossing a line into like uncharted waters for you.
Yeah.
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 Oh,
Beautiful.
Well,
Well,
thank you for coming and speaking to us. Is there anything more that we should know about the book? Is
pre-order the book, get the bonuses, get the Bliss book, use the code Harmony. It's all on your website, Lara Land Yoga
.us.
.us,
.us?
and be trauma informed in your teaching, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
Damn
important.
it.
It's so important. Honestly, I think if you are not trauma informed in your teaching, if
You're
if you're not sensitive to that, you are going to be left way behind, because that is, I mean, that's where it's at right now. That
Yeah,
is
some
the
studios
future.
are starting to require it.
Yeah.
I'm getting emails to that it's going to be required for their teachers to have some trauma sensitivity training, and I think that's going to go into schools and
Mhm.
into all professions. And like I said, there are very simple, concrete things that one can do
Mhm.
in room setup, in lighting, all our senses, music, smells, etc. Our senses are the trigger point into the mind and the nervous system. So starting there, there are, just a couple things that you can add into your teaching style that will make your room so much safer for the participants.
Beautiful.
Make them feel like they want to be there.
Yes.
Yes.
And you want to be there too.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Russell, we have to keep you coming back. I know you're right. Just keep wrestling with it all, and I always appreciate your honest wrestling, and it's interesting and fun and real, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all develops for you, Russell.
Oh,
We
thank
should
you
call
for
it
that.
Finding Harmony and Russell's Wrestling.
Wrestling. Oh
I think I think we're a little bit too far down the road to change the title of the podcast, but I was promoted to co-host. I'm grateful for that.
yeah, very happy. She's tough, so you must have really worked hard for
Yeah, it's true.
that.
Thank you so much, my dear.
Thanks
It
a
was
Thank you
lot.
so
too.
wonderful.
Thank you.